Good morning everybody and welcome back to the third Hollow Knight build video in this weird little series that we've been doing as we are turning the digital models of the Hollow Knight bosses into Lego versions, where today of course we are looking at Nightmare King Grimm, or actually I suppose I should say Troopmeister Grimm in this specific form because we have not got a red head. And first thing obviously to draw your attention to is that I can give us a fair decent wobble here. This guy has been successfully to a Lego convention and he is perfectly stable. So I'm going to show you him up close today, as well as of course we're going to put him in full height chart order with the full trio that we've done so far. I still need to get to work designing the others, and we're going to talk about future posability for this guy as well as the stand, because I actually really love how these three look together. Obviously they look fantastic as a unit, but first of course I should take a look at Grimm up close. And it is important to remember as well that I have instructions for these guys live on my PayHip page, where we have the Knight, Grimm and the Hive Knight all available for purchase, so that you guys can add these to your collection. And yes, we are working on a Hornet and a Traitor Lord at the moment as well. So let's take a look at all those details up close. So the pose we tried to recreate is when Grimm shoots out his bats, which are loosely represented by these Ninjago spinner pieces here, which are also just sort of Nightmare Heart energy. And he's got his cloak up as if the bats are coming out here. And you can see this actually has quite a nice dynamic angle to it. It should actually be, as you can see, slightly angled upwards. And that has been achieved thanks to a series of ball joints on the back of the arm, which don't look very different. But because this one is inserted in a ball and pin, it actually allows you to angle this part of the arm a little bit upwards as well. As for the rest of it, you can see that it is layered to recreate that sort of tattered cape effect, trying to bring that texture over from the game. I actually bodged my parts order, so I'm still missing one piece here. And then there is posability in the form of you being able to stretch this out fully or curve it round like I recommend, in order to make it look like he's got a bit of an angle to that arm, and as if the bats are coming out. Now, would I like these bats to be up here? Of course, but again, this is just a rough interpretation, and I threw this base together at the last minute when I was placing the parts orders, just because we'll talk about it. We'll talk about stability. As you come down to the arm, you've got one last section again that can be angled and straightened on the end, as well as a representation of his hand, which obviously is what holds onto the cloak and he holds it open. And it's important to remember that that cloak does continue outside the other side of the arm, which is here in the cape. The cape is all very flowy and all very raggedy, and was a fun challenge to sort of design together to sort of create that flowing effect, replicating the textures on the obviously 2D art in the game, which again has been one of the major challenges of translating these Hollow Knight builds, is because they are so curvy, so textured, and so un-Lego-like. I suppose actually, before we go any further, we should talk about it, right? Because Hollow Knight is actually officially in the LEGO Ideas parking lot. Now, for those of you who don't remember, that means that this has reached 10K and has not yet been approved. It could still be rejected, but it's been placed in the parking lot for further consideration, which means they are actually considering it. And it's our best and probably most likely chance to get it as an official set. Now, the submission that went through is a fantastic one that recreates some of the iconic zones, and while I certainly don't think we'll be getting anything like these sculptures, so we're good from that perspective, I cannot tell you how exciting it would be to get a Hollow Knight set should they go through with it. Largely because it's one of those things that I feel pretty lucky that I've had most of my white whale IPs and so on come in Lego form at this point. However, Hollow Knight was one that I would have obviously wanted, but hadn't really considered as possible, just because I truly didn't believe Lego would ever go there. So to see that they're actually considering it is really, really cool. However, it does mean that if they fail out of the parking lot, and believe me, I will tell you either way, it will never happen basically, because things don't go into the parking lot if they're not being talked to with the IP partner. This truly is the final and biggest test. If it fails the hurdle here, then I doubt we'll ever see it in Lego form. However, it is also the strongest chance that we have ever had. But let's get back to Grimm. Grimm was the third model I chose to do in this series after I did the Knight, obviously iconic, Hive Knight for being one of my favourite of the boss encounters, and then of course Grimm for the satisfaction of beating him in the Nightmare King version. I chose the normal colour palette because to me this is the one that really matters, and I was really interested in doing it because of the challenge that I thought that doing this head sculpt would present, and I was right, it was indeed a challenge. It's one of those opportunities that I've talked about in the past, having wanted to work on character sculpts and so on, where you get to build around this core and really test out some interesting techniques, as well as the full range of the Lego parts portfolio to be able to achieve an interesting look. And that extends beyond obviously texture and the supreme challenge of transforming it into this Lego form. In fact, let's take a look around the back, and you can actually see that this head is a full 360 degrees model. There's a couple of changes I've made around the back for the final release instructions, as well as for stability. But you'll notice that we really aren't having too much problems. He does have a slight lean forwards. However, once again, this is more just wobble base on a smooth surface. The head really is sort of the king piece here, and one of the key aspects to do was to get the eyes to have that beautiful curve to them, and of course to be inset within that white shell. Another big thing that we wanted to get right was these two sort of diagonal lines that come inwards off the top of the face, and those have been recreated fairly well to actually give Grimm that sort of signature mask shape that he has on the lower side of his face. But bring it round to the front, you can see again that curve for that very heart shape kind of look, and actually one of my his little top pieces have both been angled forwards here, but if I spin the head around, you can see we've also got that curve backwards here. Now, he is unfortunately stuck in this pose, and that is a little bit of a shame, but it is all for good reason, because the reason I chose this pose in the first place is so that he can actually be a dual piece with the knight. Now, forget about the knight being on his stand, but I want to have the knight posed up here as if we're doing a jump dash to jump over the actual bats. So I'm thinking we're going to have some sort of dynamic stand in order to be able to facilitate this, where the knight is sort of going up like this. How I'm going to do that, don't question it. And that will require a little bit of reposing on the legs and the arms of this guy to actually make it look like he's flying and about to do the monarch wings dash. The other big thing, of course, with Grimm is the various different part usages. I really love the next to knight shield sort of texture. It's a really nice way of doing a layered spine. Being able to use lots of new speed champions and various different slopes. I particularly love the 4x2 angled ones on the side of the head, as well as the 1x4 versions. And then, of course, some of my favorite parts, the 2x2 of the curves and the 3x3, which were used on the back of the head as well. Using new sort of wedge plates and anti-stud techniques in order to get all the curves here, as well as various different slopes and shapes to get the cloak done right. And then potentially one of my favorite MPUs in the set is using the new sort of wonky drain pipe bar piece to recreate how spindly the legs are, which brings us, I suppose, to the biggest talking point, and that is the stand, and why these Hollow Knight builds continue to be such a challenge to do, because none of them up until this point have normal legs. The Knight was the easiest because they're so short, so I just stuck them in here. They're ice cream cones and they're obviously very thin. Hive Knight has ended up being the most problematic, despite having thicker legs than Grimm. And Grimm, I just knew that there was no chance I would get away without a stand, so we chose to implement one of the large Mario stalk pieces that was also heavily used in the Avatar sets here. And then sort of pin that into his back. So he obviously can, in theory, his legs are attached to the ground, but there's just no way, especially with this dynamic of a pose. So he has the extra support. I'm thinking of going back, and I may add one to Hive Knight purely for conventions, just because he's flying like this, obviously on the desk, but we noticed that over a full day of conventions, things can get a little bit wobbly. They all have these stick legs, and I've really been pleased with how I've been able to replicate some of those shapes and thinness with Lego elements. It's something that traditionally is actually quite hard to do. However, they've worked out quite well, and they are all stable. As I said, I've had this trio out, I've been going in this draw unit, and we haven't really had any problems. And I mean, I know I'm usually cursed on video to cause a trauma, however, nothing's happened today, which has been lovely. To talk again about the bases, we actually have the finish now, and this is the Knight's final base, which is a reference to sort of these shell textures that you get in Dearthmouth and Forgotten Crossroads. We've got a hexagon of honey for the hive, for Hive Knight, and then, as I mentioned, we've got the tent with the bats and Nightmare Heart energy using the Ninjago spinner pieces, and they are just clipped on using the bar that comes in this piece. This is a great little seed element that I found in a Bricklink store when I was buying parts for Grimm, and I thought they were absolutely perfect for it. I didn't actually know how they had attachments. I was going to wedge them on using studs or something, but they are just truly perfect, and they look so great at making this stand suit his personality, which I think is absolutely great. But yeah, this is the complete lineup now. As I mentioned, instructions are available. I will work on the concept of having the Knight up here. I'm really looking forward to seeing and hoping that Lego Hollow Knight will pass, and of course to get some more colour in here with a Hornet, which I have a plan for. My current sketch model is too big, we'll see, and a Traitor Lord, who will just be our bulky one, and obviously will be that fun green and blue color scheme as well. But that requires me to actually go and design instead of spending money and building these guys in real life. But I am super pleased to have this trio in finished form, and I can't wait to continue expanding it. I have a feeling if we do actually end up getting sets, this will end up becoming a larger collection that will eventually go to most of the bosses, excluding God Tamer. We hate God Tamer. Anyway, let me know what you think of Grimm. If you want instructions, check out the descriptions below, and let me know which of the bosses you would like to see me do next. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.